Should you have the Mountain Dew with your dinner, or is it going to mess with your sleep? What about that sly espresso martini that you had during happy hour? Or even that pre-workout that you had before your afternoon gym session? How are those impacting your sleep, and at what time should you stop taking them? So today, I, a drug scientist, am going to explain to you what actual times you should stop taking different amounts of caffeine and why, what they are actually doing to your sleep. So first, we know that we just don't sleep as much as we should. So on average, we should have about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And we see that 20 to 45% of people across the world are not getting that. Not only do you just feel kind of terrible when you don't sleep enough, but we actually see that it substantially affects your day. We see that traffic accidents increase during that shift in daylight savings time. We are actually potentially increasing the likelihood that someone's going to get into a crash just by making them sleep just a little bit less. It's not just about total overall sleep time. It's also things like the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep, which should be around 30 minutes or less, but for a lot of people is not. And every time you wake up, you're supposed to fall back asleep within 20 minutes, which I know people who do that beautifully, and I don't understand how. So we know that a lot of people have problems with these different aspects of sleeping, and we know that that's significantly affected by caffeine. So caffeine works by literally just blocking the thing that makes you feel sleepy. Now here's the thing, about 80% or more of the entire world drinks caffeine on a consistent basis. And we drink a lot of it. So when should we stop drinking that during the day? Because we know that everyone's going to drink it anyways. So absorption is actually very similar between different people. So most people will feel these effects within 30 minutes. And most people will feel very similar levels of effects, even if you're using it in a shot versus if you're taking it orally. Now, most people are just drinking caffeine. It's always fascinating when I turn on The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and then somebody's talking about a coffee enema and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. People do use drugs in weird ways. And that is true with caffeine too. But what we see is that caffeine and basically all the ways that you use it gives you about the same dosage. So if I'm talking about something you should not use this 4 hours before bed, that means that you should not use that in either a coffee form or a coffee enema form or intravenously using caffeine, which again has happened. Now, the reason that I'm mentioning this is because the absorption is very same between people, but the excretion is very different between people. So some people will have a half-life of caffeine that's about 2 hours. So they will have about half the dose that leaves their system within 2 hours. Some other people had a half-life of 10 hours. So I'm letting you know this because the numbers that I'm going to give you are potentially very different from person to person. So here's what they found. First, they found that caffeine decreased the total amount of sleep time by about 45 minutes on average. So a little less than an hour less of sleep that you're getting if you had caffeine kind of too close to bedtime. And basically they said that you kind of gained 3 more minutes of sleep for every hour that you pushed back that time that you last had caffeine. So if you had a high dose at 5 p.m. and then you're actually no, could we do this coffee date at 4 p.m. instead? You gained an extra 3 minutes of sleep on average. But they found that in general, just having caffeine in your system had a lot of negative consequences. It took 9 minutes longer for you to fall asleep. You woke up and spent more time awake during the middle of sleep, and you also spent less time in deep sleep and more time in light sleep. And the deep sleep is some of the sleep that's more restorative. Now, they didn't find differences in REM there, so at least there's that going for you with caffeine. So now the important point. What time should you fall asleep at? Well, if you want to be asleep by midnight, I'm going to give you the specifics for that. And if you want to go to sleep at 10 p.m., just decrease it by 2 hours. So at midnight, if you want to not have any effect of caffeine on your sleep, you want to finish drinking coffee before 4 p.m. Specifically, you should just cap it off at 3:15, but I'll say about 4. They also say that pre-workout, yeah, that's very bad for you. So coffee, we're talking about around 100 mgs of caffeine. Pre-workout, we're talking about around 200 mgs of caffeine. So you should not be taking pre-workout after 11 a.m. But don't get me started on pre-workout. I can go on an entire rant about this because the amount of caffeine in it is just wild to me. But good news for tea drinkers, you can have basically black tea at any point. So they're saying that around 47 milligrams of caffeine is probably not that problematic for sleep. So if you have a pop, so a Mountain Dew or a Coke before bed, you're probably fine. Now, here's the thing. We don't actually know how tolerance works with this. So there were basically 5 studies that looked at multiple doses and only 2 of those that used chronic doses. And what they found is that tolerance might make this effect disappear. But 2 studies out there, most people who are drinking caffeine probably have developed at least least a little bit of tolerance to it. So as a person who doesn't really drink that much caffeine, if I have a cup of coffee, you will know it. And so a cup of coffee would severely affect me. But if a cup of coffee is like 1/5 of what you have in a day, if you're drinking pots, then yeah, it's probably not going to change your bedtime much at all. And then we see that all sorts of things also might affect how likely caffeine is to affect your sleep. So things like, did you drink alcohol at the same time? So that espresso martini, potentially doubly problematic for you. But then also things like, are you on birth control? Are you taking antidepressants? Are you obese? Do you smoke? All of those different things might increase or decrease the metabolism of caffeine, and so might make it more or less likely for you to feel those effects on sleep. So this might be a thing that you might want to actually like do an experiment on yourself, because we all know people are going to be drinking caffeine. So start to look at how these things affect you. So if you know you're going out for a late coffee drink, go and watch your sleep that night and compare it to a night when you're doing something very similar. The activity monitors that you wear, like the old versions, were terrible. I actually ran a study on this and found that like they couldn't even tell when you were in deep sleep, which is the easiest version of sleep to see. But the new varieties, like what your Apple Watch is able to do, yeah, it's actually kind of astounding. Start looking at this in yourself, because the individual differences really matter here. Like a lot of people have very different reactions to caffeine, but also just keep an eye on the fact that you probably shouldn't be drinking over 100 milligrams like past 4 to 5 p.m. That's kind of what all those studies are saying. So yeah, the more you drink, the worse it is for your sleep, the later it is at night. That's a pretty easy rule of thumb there.